In the 70s and 80s of the last century, traveling to Australia still was a huge and far journey. On the 2nd of January 1980, the trip started with a Boeing 747 of the airline Qantas to Sydney in the state of New South Wales. At that time, it still took 4 intermediate miles. If Australia has a heart, it beats here in Sydney. In the 1980s, the city had a population of over 3 million and the trend was rising. Over 20% of Australia's population lived in this city. At the time, living in Sydney is beautiful and exciting. The lifestyle clearly shows that the population is from North America and Europe. The Sydney people themselves say that life is easygoing in their city. Sydney was founded in 1788. The first settlers came to the country on ships from faraway England as convicts. After the Second World War in 1945, the country was flooded by immigrants from Europe. The birthplace of Australia can be found in the city's district, The Rocks, where a life-size memorial stands. Martin's Place is in the middle of the city. There is a small arena set into the ground with stone steps to sit on. Every day, artists offer themselves. Whether that is good or not, nobody asks. What counts is that there is something going on. The Harbour Bridge at the Harbour of Sydney is a landmark of the city and was inaugurated in 1932. It has been responsible for the development and future of the region since that time. Opposite of the Harbour Bridge is the Opera House, and at the same time, multi-purpose building and a landmark for Australia in general. The building has an unconventional architecture. After 18 years of construction, the inauguration took place in 1973 with Queen Elizabeth of England. The Queen also is the head of state of the continent. The sail-like appearance of the roof construction was equipped with bright tiles, which visitors can see well from close up. Already in 1980, a Harbour Bridge tour was a refreshing event, while living with 35 degrees in the shade. It leads past the Opera House, offering a good photo view from the waterside. On water, you can get to the different parts of the city. Countless boats, sailors of Australia are on the water, with the most impressive equipment. The Blue Mountains are a mountain range 60 kilometers from Sydney. The foothills begin with an impressive landscape of rock faces, eucalyptus forests, and numerous hiking trails. In 1980, one could already cross deep gorges with a gondola. The striking three rocks in the Blue Mountains are called the Three Sisters. Back in Sydney. By the way, in the east of the continent, the time is 10 hours ahead compared to Central Europe. We found very good restaurants in the city, as well as entertainment and cultural facilities. The impressive Archibald Fountain stands in the large Hyde Park. In the south of the city lies the railway station, which was inaugurated in 1903. It is the largest of the continent. Ziggy and Bernd, German friends, accompany us on the railways of Australia with only first-class coaches. Once a week, within 48 hours, the train rolled to Central Australia. The route on the map runs through 3 states: New South to Port Augusta in South Australia, then north to the state of North Australia, up to Alice Springs. After 136 kilometers, our train crossed the high line of the Blue Mountains. The first stop was in Broken Hill on the next day, already more than 1,300 kilometers away from Sydney. For a short time, everybody could get off the train. Broken Hill was the largest silver zinc mine in the world for a long time. Due to the long journey of about 48 hours, the train had comfortable facilities with only 2-person sleeping compartments, with shower, restaurant and saloon car with loosely arranged seating. The red sand announces that we are approaching the center of Australia. Our train arrived at noon, sweltering heat in Alice Springs. Almost exactly in the geographic center of the continent lies the remote town of Alice Springs, which is well over 1,000 kilometers away from any major city. The name Alice Springs developed due to the water sources and became the most important point in the center of Australia. The Aborigines are a minority. Some children of this ethnic group listen to the scene. Otherwise, the Aborigines live on the lower level of the standard of living. Beautiful to look at the flowering jacaranda trees. Camels were brought into the country as load carriers before the railroad could be built. Appeals surrealistically. Another highlight for us was a trip with a helicopter over a part of the MacDonnell Ranges in the immediate vicinity of Alice Springs. "644 kilometers long and 60 kilometers wide, this red sandstone mountains range stretches out. The Palm Valley here on foot, tours can be found on marked trails. Evolutionary and geologically, here are some of the oldest land masses on Earth. We reached the Simpsons Gap Walk by walking through soft sand. This oasis is a gorge house. Its granite rocks shimmer red or purple, depending on the incidence of light. Another day, another destination. A tour to the Olgas and Ayers Rock. From Alice Springs, again, almost 500 road kilometers. It took 6 hours in our bus with only one short break. In these endless plains, where the distances gradually take an oppressive proportion, suddenly mountains rise into the air. On a dusty road, the Mount Olgas come close. The rock formation counts 36 mountaintops, giving a circumference of 22 kilometers. The primal inhabitants, the Aborigines, call their mountains Katachuda. The name comes from the language of the Aborigines. Kata stands for head, and so the name means many heads, which describes the mountaintops well. In 32 kilometers distance from the Olgas, Ayers Rock rises, the ultimate landmark of Central Australia. Called Uluru by the natives, it is their sacred mountain. A colossus originated about 800 million years ago. Geologists believe that this sandstone monolith can be seen only a few % above the surface. The erosion of the millennia formed bizarre shapes and imprints on the rock. The highest elevation measured is 348 meters. Climbing it was indeed an adventure. For safety reasons, chain ropes are attached, as the first part of the path leads upwards steeply. Plaques remind us of the fatal falls of the past. You should be free from giddiness when climbing this monumental rock. To get all up to the top, we had to cross several bumps. The lens of the Super 8 camera can't catch the dimensions. On the very top you find a compass rose. With your signature, you prove that you truly have been up here. Spectacularly appeared the Uluru, the Ayers Rock, at sunrise or sunset. A range of colors from purple, violet to the deepest red. The return trip from Central Australia back to Sydney was a huge 4,689 kilometer flight. In Sydney we changed planes to our next destination, the coastal town of Townsville, north of the state of Queensland, is a popular starting point to the Great Barrier Reef and tropical islands. The town had about 1,000 inhabitants in the 80s. Founded only in 1864, today it is characterized by numerous new buildings. Townsville was strikingly sparsely populated. Cattle breeding, sugarcane cultivation, and plantations of tropical fruits form the economic base of the largest tropical city in Australia. In beautiful weather, we are now sitting together again on a speedboat. We had planned to visit one of the offshore islands. There were tour boats in every size. The offer was large, ranging from yachts to catamarans. Australia's largest catamaran, the Victory, steered to the Great Keppel Island, an island with beautiful beaches to relax or do things that bring fun. All together we drove along the highway number 1 from Townsville in southerly direction to the town of Gladstone. Again, almost 900 kilometers. 100 kilometers are allowed at max on the almost gorged overland roads. In Gladstone, the helicopter was ready for the flight to Heron Island in the southern Great Barrier Reef. Heron Island was part of the national park with research stations for flora and fauna. Naughty birds are numerous here. Such as seeing the corals on careful footwalks during low tide. It was remarkable to see the vast amount of killer mussels. At this large killer mussel, a foot should better not get caught in. In the early morning hours, I could see how a turtle at low tide tried to reach the open sea. Probably the animal has been delayed at the onset of the rising tide. For us as tourists, it was an amazing and informative time in nature that we were allowed to spend here. Great change of scenery, a round trip with a helicopter at the Gold Coast near Brisbane. The view from above on the beach of 57 kilometers is breathtaking. The cityscape itself is also characterized by many channels and islands. Since 1950, the city has grown steadily. Unfortunately, after 20 minutes, the fun was over. Our heli landed in front of an amusement park with activities of all kinds. For the first time, we see kangaroos, the heraldic animal of Australia, which are very shy in the wild. An additional point of attraction were the koalas. The tame animals can be easily taken onto the arm. Mainly Australians spend their vacations here in Surfers Paradise. The streetscape in the 1980s was already very fashionable, colorful, and free. The beaches, with their width and length, hardly allow for large gatherings of people. There was no proof of crowded beaches or a lack of space in January 1980. The yellow cars of the beach patrol had the task to keep a lookout that no sharks approach the beach. With little traffic, we drove into the hinterland of Brisbane. Our destination was a little farm close to the village Miles. A completely new experience for us. We followed an invitation to the farm riverside and arrived there after several hours of driving in huge heat. We were very relieved to arrive. Family gathered welcomed us heartfelt, as visitors from that far away were a rare happening. Family Gathered has 4 sons that support here in the farming business. It was an amazing happening when Ian turned several loops on his motorbike. Ian is very likely to take over the farm one day. Three bulls came close when realizing that faded gloves were offered as a delight. On the area, a 50 by 20 meter big glass house tent is placed, where Mrs. Geldert grows gloves. She can sell the flowers in an area that reaches up to Brizzy. The clove bunches are wrapped in foil and stored in a cold store. We were happy to help in this shady place. Scott has purchased huge grounds here in the hinterland. A large wooden house stands in the center, where he lives with his wife Philippa, who he used to call Phil, with heartfelt nickname. The house is cozy and flooded with light. Handsome Toby is also part of the interior. Since his childhood, Scott is used to living on the countryside. They will make something great out of it in the coming years. With a friend from the city, they keep some horses together. An electric fence keeps them in their paddock. Back in the house in Riverside, we visited Scott's parents. Since more than 30 years, they live and work on this huge area where horses shouldn't be missing too. The ground here can store water for long periods of time and therefore makes farming possible. Jumping into the water in this heat was the best idea. Though appearing muddy from the outside, the water is clear and refreshing. We even stumbled across fossilized trunks of trees, signs of a huge past. Wild kangaroos, of course, exist here too, but it wasn't easy to find them. Big departure today for 3 days to the Carnarvon National Park of Queensland. Together with friends of Murphy and Scott, we started at the farm riverside, traveling on dusty roads for about 350 kilometers to the campsite. Sudden stop, traffic jam. A bulldozer had slipped off the bridge and we couldn't go on. But we were lucky. After only half an hour, we were able to drive off again. The cars in front of us had already waited for 6 hours until the accident was fixed. Our camp was already pulled up by other friends at our arrival. We were 8 people now. In the morning at breakfast, everyone got his portion in this cozy, unforgettable round of people. Our destination was the most famous and easily accessible part of the Carnarvon Gorge, which through millions of years had created a canyon landscape. This national park has the size of almost 3,000 square kilometers, among others with high rock walls that disappear in the jungle. On a steep ladder on the sandstone cliffs, which seems breathtaking, you get to the impressive and monumental natural phenomena in the Carnarvons. Unique, dark, deep gorges are the unique phenomena. The fearsome, narrow crevices with wet stones and boulders force a careful and firm step. In tiny steps, we walk towards a resting area where our friends have made the effort to give us a pleasant time, with drinks and snacks in cheerful company. Murray always had to share some story. Ian was cooking the tea, Ziggy refueled his energy, Bernd was always Thursday, Siegfried and Guy were occupied with themselves, Gret was our doctor, and Scott and Hatter made themselves comfortable. I was very content with the situation. Then, a sudden surprise from our friends.
Give me a home among the gum trees, with lots of plum trees, a sheep or two, a kangaroo, a clothesline out the back, veranda out the front, and an old rocking chair. I've been around the world a couple of times, or maybe more. I've seen some sights, I've had delights on many a foreign shore. But when my friends all ask me the place that I adore, I tell them right away, boom, 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 boom. Give me a home among the gum trees, with lots of plum trees, a sheep or two, a kangaroo, a clothesline out the back, veranda out the front, and an old rocking chair.
Jumping into the water from a large rock here in the national park had been total fun and refreshment for all of us. It took 745 kilometers from our place in the wilderness to Brisbane, the capital of Queensland. Founded in 1824, this city was a lively, beautiful metropolis in 1982, with a generous architecture. Brisbane is a vacation city with many possibilities too. It was a pleasure to stroll around the sun-drenched streets and squares, which immediately cheered up the mood. In January and February, the temperature is usually 30 up to 35 degrees. Brisbane is also known for its colleges and universities. Robbie was our good guide, showing us the city. He insisted that we meet his family living here in the city. Largely spreading is the city situated at the Brisbane River in the 1980s with 1.2 million inhabitants. Even in that times, it was an unusual departure from Brisbane city when we loaded our luggage and purchased goods from the supermarket to a water taxi. The destination was the offshore island Stradbroke Island, consisting of a north and a south island. Landing on the almost uninhabited South Island was difficult at low tide. The boat guide checked the shallow water depth with a stick. In the end, we had to take the shoes off and carry all goods to our Australian weekend house. A comfortable domicile with no electricity. For 2 or 3 days, we stayed on this small island covered with sand dunes, overgrown with casuarine bushes and deserted long beaches. A surprise for all of us was when Jeffrey, the fourth son of the family Geldert, showed up with a surfboard on his back to surf. We left Stradbroke Island to the direction of Sunshine Coast, came across bushfires on the way, which often occur in Australia. It looks worse than it truly is. A good viewpoint is the Sunshine Coast south of Brisbane, very popular by tourists too, with a beach of 200 kilometers. "30 kilometers into the hinterland is a particularly appreciated place for excursions, especially for family. The center is the 16-meter-high big pineapple, where on the inside everyone can get information about fruits and tastes of all kinds. This little tiny driving nutshells offered the possibility to make a short excursion into the rainforest of Queensland. Small mini trains driving through these generously laid out pineapple plantations. Tomorrow, we will leave Australia for about a week. As the South Seas are virtually a cat's paw away from Australia, our further journey goes to the 3,500 kilometer distant Fiji Islands. The Fiji Islands in the South Pacific is an island nation with over 300 islands of volcanic origin. Due to a delay of the flight at the airport of Suva, capital of Fiji, we didn't reach our planned connection boat and needed to change to a small plane. To our surprise, a German pilot welcomed us on the flight to the island Malololalai. The flight was short, over beautiful palm trees. We landed on Malololalai and a small truck was waiting for our ride to the accommodation. The tropical humid climate is ideal for the rich flora that can be seen in all seasons. We are on the main island, Vetilevu, the largest of the whole archipelago, with a land area of over 11,000 square kilometers. Large parts of the main island are covered with tropical virgin forest. The capital Suva is the administrative and economical center of the whole island. In the 1980s, the population was about 700,000, with a mixture of Indians, Chinese, and Europeans. At first glance, the flair of Suva has nothing to do with how one in general would imagine the South Sea. Many things appear American or European. A splash of color is the daily market with colorful fruits and goods for everyday use. The view from the water down to the beach of Malololalai, it was incredible. The tourist complex is large. Only a few bungalows for guests are available. These are hidden next to flower bushes and palm trees. The Fijians are friendly people, especially towards strangers. We were welcomed with open arms, and they always had a smile on their face. The island Castaway, north of Malololalai, could be visited by speedboat. For those who could afford it, it was also possible by waterplane. The friendliness of the islanders is noticed here everywhere too. As we have experienced, being the first Europeans who visited these islands. In the afternoon of the same day, we were only a few miles away on the island of Mana, which was opened as one of the first islands for tourism. Sugarcane, coffee, pineapples, and of course tourism are the most profitable economic activities. Via plane we traveled over the coastline to Orchid Island, 10 kilometers from the capital Suva away. It is offering a large, open-air cultural center. Every visitor can get an insight on the traditions and way of life. The man moving the boat with a calmness and seriousness.
Please Sampula. My name is Meli Tualau. Some thousands of years ago, there echoed in this valley the sounding mills of stone implements on logs for building canoes, and the first smoke of lava or earthen oven spiraled into the air. I am the descendant of those first settlers, and I shall be your
He
guide.
explained that a few thousand years ago a culture had developed which is still partially preserved today.
It is therefore most disrespectful for anyone to be standing up while the others are sitting down. And so, my friends, I respectfully ask you, please, to remain comfortably seated while we are sailing around the island. And so now, allow me please to begin. The total land areas of Fiji is 7,055 square miles. Its reefs cover 100,000 square miles, and the whole of the group comprises of 320 islands, of which 100 are inhabited. Fiji's climate is regarded as being good for the tropics and healthy, and the mild tropical climate is of course ideal.
The demonstrations of the everyday life of the Fijians could be observed well from the boat.
To take out the leftover portion of the brown crust, leaving them with the white inside the split. From then on, the work is handled by the experts for the process of soaking, beating, drying.
We were surprised that we were the only people who observed these demonstrations. The stay in the cultural center was impressive and very interesting. Back to Malololalai. The boat was steered with feet, and only at high tide we got to Trisha Island and the island Beshkomber, which is mainly preferred by young Australians. Each island has its own atmosphere and therefore its own experience. In the current rainy season, these islands are quite safe from the weather. Again, our visit here was warm and completely unbiased. Back to Malululalai. These are already the preparations for the barbecue in the evening. In the morning, an earth oven is prepared. The meat is wrapped in palm leaves and covered with linen. In the evening, the meat is cooked and ready to be eaten. When the torches light up, it is time to eat. The show of a fire dance during sunset belongs to the daily attractions. Only male are allowed amongst the firewalkers, a touristic attraction where men walk across fire.
You may be interested in the costumes. The ankles of the hills is decorated with dry fern leaves.
And again, another one of those South Sea nights that can become addictive to foreigners. With excursions to the shore, to swim in the sea, as well as the appetizing barbecue on the beach under palm trees. The night, the ship anchored off the main island, Vetulevu. After sunrise, we set course for the Javasa group of islands with their golden beaches and countless palm trees. The individual bays are true paradises of unbelievable beauty and solitude. We enjoyed the trip with excursions for swimming in the sea, as well as the appetizing barbecue on the beach under palm trees. The captain of the Blue Lagoon and his crew did all to make our stay on board absolutely comfortable. Traveling to this curved bay to an island village of the island chain was again an interesting route. The life in these villages is the best opportunity to get a little insight into the everyday life of these people. In the center of the village, there usually is a church as meeting point for the inhabitants. We could move around freely. Electricity is still a foreign word here. The food mainly comes from the sea. Our weekly arriving ship, on which also locals are taken, it is always a great happening for the very friendly inhabitants. On a small shell market, there are souvenirs and goods for daily use. To our surprise, in the evening the villagers came to the ship to show us folkloristic dances. Once again, a small refreshment on one of the beaches before our ship calls for departure. The anchor was lifted for a last time from the blue waters of the lagoon for the return trip to Lautoka. As a gift, and also as a nice memory from this trip, the crew of the Blue Lagoon presented us the most beautiful song of these islands, the farewell song Isalei. Back at the hotel, the days went by fast. Highlights were the daily stunning sunsets. The return trip to Australia again were 3,500 kilometers on a plane. Back in Surfers Paradise, in the apartment hotel Aquarius, on the 27th floor of the house, was our last accommodation. We were again and again drawn to the window, to once again enjoy the magnificent view of the city and the beautiful white beach, where the houses cast long shadows on the water. With melancholy, we looked back on the past weeks and said, "Goodbye, Australia."